This is Architecture 360. I'm Lee Bay.
The history of street photography is currently being rewritten.
Vivian Maier.
Vivian Maier.
Vivian Maier?
That's the new documentary, Finding Vivian Maier, now hitting theaters. You may have heard of Maier before. She was the Chicago area nanny who for decades lived a secret life as a skilled street photographer. But she never shared what she shot, so no one really knew of her photography until after she died in 2009 at age 83. Chicago and John Maloof bought her negatives and rolls of undeveloped film at an estate sale, and after all that developing, scanning, and printing, tens of thousands of stunning black and white photographs taken by Maier between the 1950s through the 1970s. A star was born. Maier has been the subject of exhibitions, books, magazine articles, and, of course, now this documentary. But there is no documentary about Chuck Cushman, but there should be. Cushman was a Chicago businessman, not a pro photographer, who, like Maier, photographed the city. His work begins in the late 1930s and continued to about 1970. But what set Cushman apart is that he photographed almost exclusively in color, an early adapter, you might say, of color slide film. So a city we normally see in black and white photographs is represented through Cushman's eyes in brilliant, rich color. It is both haunting and beautiful. So, the urban photography of Maier and Cushman, now on Architecture 360. I was born in 1965, which is almost a half century ago, but this is what I imagined Chicago was like in the decades before I was born. Kind of like the old Untouchables TV show, dark, gritty, and in black and white. Of course, the real life was in color, just like it is now, but movies and books from that time tell a different story. Color film in movies was still expensive and rarely used. Color TV, forget about that. All of which makes Chuck Cushman's photography more arresting. As early as 1938, he shot in color using Kodak slide film. He captures the last days of an older, decaying Chicago. Among my favorites, a 1944 photo of Tycoon Potter Palmer's castle at 1350 North Lakeshore Drive. Color makes the building seem more alive, and yet also more doomed. And it was. It was demolished in 1950. In Cushman's Chicago, gaslight and cobblestone yield to the bulldozer and the future. His collection can be seen online at the Indiana University archives. Indiana University professor Eric Sandweiss 2 years ago wrote about Cushman's collection in a great book called The Day in Its Color. Sandweiss back then told me that Cushman photographed mills, the lakefront, areas that were to be demolished for urban renewal. In some ways, Sandweiss said, color is the narrative. Cushman seemed to be saying, well, this is what the world looks like, so why wouldn't I want to show it? And show it he does. To see the images, tap the headline, and then tap See More.
As she was photographing, she was seeing just how close you can come into somebody's space. That tells me a lot about her.
Maier's work has been compared to that of her would-be contemporaries, people like Harry Callahan and Walker Evans, and others who documented urban people and spaces and became quite famous for it. She is indeed that good. Through Maier's eyes, we see old women on street corners, seemingly lost in an increasingly modern Chicago. We see workaday folk walking and shopping beneath the neat script of neon. We see a Chicago that no longer exists, Old Maxwell Street, and the Madison Street Skid Row that used to be in the West Loop. Maier shows a diverse Chicago with noticeable emphasis on black people and Latinos, and how she kept her work secret even though the kids she took care of sometimes accompanied her on her photo trips is all fodder for the documentary. That and the gorgeous photography. Thanks for listening to Architecture 360. I'm Lee Bay.